Good evening and welcome to Wednesday, January 11th, Public Forum in person at Sheehan High School. I just want to read a statement about public comment, and then I do have a list of people who've signed up, so we'll start with them, and then we can open the floor to anybody else who has comment who hasn't had the opportunity to sign up. The board welcomes public comment as it represents an opportunity for members of the public to express their views to board members on matters within the board's authority. We ask that all speakers maintain appropriate standards of decorum. No boisterous or inappropriate conduct is permitted. We expect comments to be respectful and in civil tone, and we do not permit name-calling, raised voices, or vulgarity. All comments must be directed to the board and not to any individual board member or individual member of administration. Although the board values and appreciates the input of the public, the board and the administration will not be responding to questions or engaging with dialogue during the public comment period. However, you will be able to ask questions, and to the best of our abilities, or Mr. Stein's ability, if that information is available tonight, we are happy to share. The board administration will determine whether and if questions that do arise during public comment period need to be addressed on a future agenda in a future meeting. So if there are things that we cannot answer tonight, we will be taking note of them and get the answers in a future communication to all members of the community. Having said that, I do have two sign-up sheets. The first person on the sign-up sheet is Anne Verone Litterly. And when you come to the microphone, if you could just repeat your name and state your address for the record. Thank you.
It is on. Hi, Anne Verone Letterly, 344 Main Street here in Wallingford. I am a Moran teacher, and I am the president of the WEA. I wanted to take this time to thank the board and central administration for this opportunity for a public forum. It has been nice to see the reminder emails for people to share their responses and their concerns about this. This is different, and it is refreshing to have this input in this time to give input. As you know, the WEA did survey its members back before Christmas, and we did have 42% of our members who did participate, and we found that to be an excellent number. For most surveys end up in the 30%, so we were happy. I know that you have read it. I did want to highlight a couple of things because I know that you all go through a lot of material in any given week. One thing that came out clear from the people who responded, first of all, most of the people who responded don't have a lot of ties to Wallingford other than that they live here, that they work here. And so I think that added for a different type of answer that we got. So these are teachers, some are parents, obviously they're all of our employees, but they may look at things differently than the emotional types of responses that come about during these discussions. At all levels, it was highly recommended that we renovate to new. More than just basic renovations and consolidations. If you add that at the high school, which I know is going to be the more interesting point of this discussion, if you add that to the basic renovations, over 60% of the people who responded to our survey believe that we need to keep two schools. At the middle level, concerns about air conditioning, HVAC, things like enough plugs came out, but everyone said renovate to new over leaving it just the way it is. At the elementary level, that also came through, that renovate to new, and then add that to do basic renovations also came into play as the high numbers for that. I do not know if you were given the individual responses, but I did categorize them. Okay, and some of the things that stood out to me was Cook Hill. Portables need to go. I remember when they were put in, and that was 30 years ago, and so they need to go. There was a lot of concern about air conditioning, HVAC systems across the entire responses people had. Also, that came up several times in the email is why not look at how we do elementary, moving back to K to 5 models versus keeping the pre-K 2 and 3 to 5 model. In addition to that, transportation became an issue as well. People talking, we're on this side of town, to get across town to go to Lyman Hall is a long time. We're near Cheshire, that school's near North Haven, the Lyman Hall right here. Lyman Hall obviously is closer to North Branford and North Haven. Intersections, roads, capacity to handle traffic in that area also was a concern of 2 or 3 different people. And I know personally one of mine, traffic flow in that area. I used to live there, so I know how tough it is on a regular day there. And that's really about what I was able to pull out today. One of the other things said that retrofitting the pre-K to 2 schools for pre-K to 2 students. They're seeing a lot of things that pre-K to 2 students need that they don't seem to have. Did not go into details. I can check on that for you. And I believe that's just about everything that I highlighted that came out through there. Once again, the WEA wants to partner with the Board of Education and the town on this. We want to make the best decisions for our students. We found it was important that we talk to our members about this so that we can come to, a calm evening of information for you. If you have any questions on the survey during the course of the evening, I am going to go sit in the back, and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to thank the WEA because I do know that you were pressed and you got the survey out before the holiday. You worked over a weekend to get us the results, and it came to us, over a weekend. So I do want to take the time to thank you for your efforts and acknowledge that there was definitely some work put into this and the consolidation of responses and formatting it for us. So we do appreciate that.
Thank you very much. The thanks on that one goes to Vanessa Mather, our Survey Monkey guru. Thank you.
Awesome. Next on the list, I have Mr. Corso. He is followed by Mrs. Riscotti, if that helps.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight. Joe Corso, 3 Juniper Street, Wallingford. Obviously, the parent of 4 Wallingford students and also the principal at Lyman Hall. I was going to try and separate my feedback, but there's really no way for me to do that. So I'm going to speak from both roles as I'm up here tonight. The first thing I wanted to address is some of the falsehoods out there. Obviously, class size is not going to change. Whether we stick with 1 or 2 high schools, the class size, the district's been committed to keeping it where it is, so that doesn't shift. In all honesty, I am team 1 high school. That's what I really think is best for our kids. I'm going to go into some detail as to why, but class sizes will not shift. Academics, I think, need to be the next focus and what we can provide students. So I just want to share some recent issues that we've had with our diminishing enrollment. So obviously, Sheehan's at 736 right now, and we're at 941, and we are planned to continue to drop in enrollment, which will take us somewhere in the 1,600 to below 1,600 range. In recent years, because we don't have enough student interest and we've been close, we lost our auto shop, which is a great shop for many of our students that have different interests. So we're not able to provide them. We just didn't have the numbers necessary. Obviously, when you combine the 2 schools, that gives us an opportunity to potentially be able to bring that back. Our 2 capstone business courses, Accounting 2 and Marketing 2, have not run in years because of low interest. Again, if we have the ability to bring students together, there'll be potential to run those. Theater 2 hasn't run in a few years. This year specifically, we got hit in the AP area. So AP Physics, we had under the number we needed to run it. And we came up with a plan to not run it this year. And also AP Economics. So those are 2 big courses that we've run in the past that we were not able to run this year because we just didn't have the students interested in taking it. And again, if we were combined the 2 schools, because we work very closely together and we combine those numbers, both the students at Sheehan and Lyman Hall would have been able to have that class this year in their schedule. So that's I think really important. Excuse me, just gotta find my note page. The facilities, renovating to new is just not going to cut it. It doesn't change the square footage of our classrooms, which is the biggest issue we have right now. Our classrooms are too small, size-wise. So it doesn't change the square footage of those classrooms unless we eliminate classrooms, which at Lyman Hall, we're at a reasonable kind of percentage of capacity use. We don't have the ability to eliminate classrooms. And again, our square footage wouldn't change. If you come watch some of our lab science classes, they're doing their actual labs on the countertops on the left and right of the classroom because the kids' books and everything else are on the lab stations where they have to sit for instruction. So we just do not have the facilities that we need to in order to provide the best possible instruction to our students. Building a brand new school facility is going to set Wallingford apart. All right. One, it brings our students together. It brings our town together. It provides students with a beautiful state-of-the-art facility that they can have some pride in. Every year, our students in the SEC Captain's Council or our leadership teams travel to other schools for different conferences. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard them talking about how amazing this building was, how amazing the classroom was, the cafeteria. We don't have any of that. Mike Acabo is my head custodian, and he does an amazing job keeping our facility running. Tremendous job. If you've been to Lyman Hall, you know we have ramps. Underneath all those ramps are tunnels, and when there is a temperature change, those ramps turn into basically ice skating rinks that kids have to be very careful moving down. We run fans throughout the day to try to keep the hallways dry. It would be, I think, a heroic effort to put our facility back together to get and renovate in a manner in which it would actually benefit students and student learning. And I think that's the biggest piece that we have for facilities. There's been some mention about opportunities for kids in clubs, activities, theater, after school. So all of those things, including music and our band programs, have seen a drastic hit in numbers over recent years. Our band used to be over 100, is floating around 60 now, and anyone who knows music, that's a drastic decrease of some key instruments and the ability to produce both an amazing marching band program and also other programs throughout. So again, combining those programs will give us a really good-sized band, and no student will lose an opportunity to participate in band or theater. Our theater program's been hurting in recent years, and not all of this is because of COVID. A lot of it is because of the decrease in enrollment. This would give us an opportunity to put on multiple shows every year and provide kids with opportunities. Athletics. So right now we have freshman boys basketball. We don't have a freshman girls team. We had freshman football. That was the only fall freshman team we have. We're expecting to have a freshman baseball team, but that's it. All our other programs operate without freshman teams. And some people have spoken about other schools not having freshman teams or other teams to play. Part of what we do, like we did with football this year, is you just go outside the SEC and we find other leagues and other schools, and it's a limited season. So instead of a 20-game season, the freshman team might have a 10-game season. But there's a lot of benefits to getting these kids the proper play at the proper level so that we're not throwing kids into a level of participation that they're not really ready for just yet. So there's a lot of benefit there. And they wouldn't lose the opportunity because combining the two schools, getting the new facilities, we'd also have an opportunity to do an intramural program, which would provide an avenue for every kid at Lyman Hall, if they chose to participate in after-school athletic activities. Right now, we can't do that because I have the smallest gym in the state of Connecticut, and I only have one. Can't do it. We run 3 classrooms in a gym that's almost smaller than this auditorium. Just tiny. We have no aux facility, so our teams practice from right after school until 9 o'clock at night. There's no room for anything else. So we need some updated facilities. And again, like I said, clubs. Our clubs never limit membership, so that's open to everyone. I really see this benefiting our students in a number of ways. They come up through athletics, they play in leagues together all the way up till middle school, and then we separate into 2 high schools. The rivalry is fun. I understand that. The Powder Puff game is great, but we can't make decisions about the academics and the futures of our kids based off of a rivalry that is fantastic, but I promise you we can find another one. And a Powder Puff game where we could get creative and maybe have seniors play juniors, or the East Side seniors play the West Side seniors. But there are ways for us to continue with some of those traditions and still provide the students of Wallingford the education they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corso. Mrs. Scotti is next, followed by Shelley Hemingway. Not yet.
It's on. Hello, I'm Melanie Versace. I live on 9 Platte Drive. I wanted to come and speak. I've been speaking about the facility study even since 4 years ago when the first time not the first time, probably the third time we've been talking about this. And I think COVID has really shown us that schools are the center of our community. And this really needs to be a community decision. And I understand that it still has to go to the town council, and on the cover of the survey, it talked about potentially it wouldn't be 5 years until anything would be being done. I know we've talked about it needing, if we're gonna do one high school, it needing to be Lyman Hall because of the 20-year state commitment that we have that started in 2008. Well, in 5 years, it's gonna be 2028, and that's 20 years. So we can consider another location, a more central location, a brand new location, to build as new, to have it be more in the center of town so that people who live on this side of town, it takes 24 minutes for me to get to Lyman Hall with no traffic. That's probably gonna be a 45-minute bus ride, maybe, could be longer. That's a long time for kids to sit on the bus. Another neutral location can be considered. Lyman Hall in 2028 could be very easily a magnet school. Sheehan could be used as a facility that could be the brand new park and rec. We're supposedly getting new turf. I really pray that that's happening because that turf is horrendous at Sheehan, where kids are turning ankles, tearing ACLs. It's not great. So whatever is best for the town should be decided by the town. I really strongly believe this needs to go to a town referendum vote. I heard Superintendent Belizzi talk about a February 6th meeting with the state. I really would love for this to be an inclusive process where it could be considered that there could be a parent rep that also attends that meeting, and that there could be a student rep, and that there could be somebody from the town council. So it could be a collective, community-informed decision. Everyone can hear the same information at the same time. If it has to go to the town council anyway, and we want to be open and inclusive and allow people to understand what's really happening, and we can make a decision for our town, I think it should be a more open process. And I would really implore you to consider that. Superintendents change, sometimes Board of Ed members change, but the community is still here. It's our community. These are our schools. And we should have as much voice as possible into what the schools look like, what are the offerings that are happening, what do we want the feel of our town to be, because the schools really are the center of it. So the more voice that we have, the better. I've heard lots of talk about renovating versus building new, but we don't really have all the information yet. We still have to go back. I heard about calculating eligible and ineligible items. So we don't really know the reimbursement costs yet, so we don't have all the information. So I don't know how we can make a recommendation, and maybe after the February 6th meeting, there'll be more information for that. When we talk about reduced enrollment, I'm sure there is reduced enrollment, because when you look at the facilities in all the towns, our parks, we're having problems in our parks. Our community pool is now a big empty hole in the ground. People can go to other surrounding towns, pay a little bit more taxes, and get more offerings for their families. So we may continue to see reduced enrollment because this is a community issue, a larger community issue. And I'm glad that it's going to the town council, and I will attend those meetings as well, because this is a bigger issue. We're gonna need more fields, more spectator seating, auxiliary gyms. If you wanna offer wrestling and other things, you're gonna have to be able to manage wrestling and basketball and anything that's happening at the same time and in the same seasons. So I ask that this be the most open, inclusive process it possibly could be. Also, I really request that the restructuring study be translated into Spanish, because even if the survey went out in Spanish, you're asking them questions about a study that was only in English. And we have a large percentage of our population that is Spanish in Wallingford, so the study needs to be translated into Spanish as well. And also, there was information that I requested that hoping I'll be able to get about what courses have been removed and added from each of the high schools over the past 4 years. So we can see, is there equity in both of the high schools around what is being added and taken away? Although there has been reduced enrollment, you're still talking about 1,700 kids that are gonna be in one school. They deserve good facilities, they deserve good fields. If we're gonna build as new, let's find a site that's better. Let's build it more in the center of town. It's a very large town that will help us with the transportation issues as well. I'm not saying we have to have 2 high schools. I'm just saying let's do this the right way. It doesn't have to be Lyman Hall. If we're talking about 5 years, that's 2028, and we're past the 20 years. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for offering this opportunity, and I hope that you'll consider some of the things I discussed today.
Thank you very much for your thoughtful comments and for attending. I am going to allow everybody on the list to speak on public comment, and then I'm sure that there will be some feedback from administration, Mr. Stein, and even board members. So I do have one more person on the list, Shelley Hemingway.
Hi, my name is Shelley Hemingway. I live at 24 Wooding Road, and my child is in the school system. I just wanted to say that I am opposed to the merging of either the middle schools or the high schools. Besides the concerns that we all have of larger class sizes and more burdens on the teacher with larger class sizes, also, I have a concern about the bus and the busing and how long it would take, because my son has type 1 diabetes, and when he went to Highland School, we lived behind Yalesville School. When he went to Highland School, it took like 40 or 45 minutes for the bus ride home, and that's, a 10-minute drive. And that's just from Highland School to Yalesville School. So I have a big concern with my child or child with any medical needs for the long bus ride, because it would take over an hour to get to the other side of town. And that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing and for your comments. Mrs. Lavelle, you have more names? Thank you so much. Okay. Michael Terrell.
Hello? Okay. Hi, Mike Terrell, 168 South Main Street. I have a daughter at DAG at this point in time, and I'm also a teacher here at Sheehan. So I have a couple questions, Mr. Stein, about the plans. So in the plans, it was put under physical education, but there was no athletics, and then in other plans, there was athletics. So the breakdown of the square footage, was it both athletics and phys ed?
I think the intent is that those two would overlap, and the programming would need to be itemized between which would be dedicated purely towards PE and which items would be associated with teams and athletics, so, yes.
Okay, so when you compared the schools, you looked at Sheehan and then you looked at Lyman Hall, and you gave a square footage or a subtotal. Okay, so in your subtotal, you said Lyman Hall had 20,592, and Sheehan had 36,892, which added it up total to 57,484. But in the new school plan, you only had a subtotal of 44,600. Now, if you are saying Lyman Hall needs a renovation of a gym, So that's adding on to Lyman Hall's square footage to make sure that everyone, there's enough ample space. You're not even taking that into consideration with the new school, plus you're even less than what we have right now. Because Lyman Hall and Sheehan right now are 57,484, and the new school renovation is 44,600. So that doesn't make sense to me. As Mr. Corso said, Lyman Hall has had a small facility. Teachers have to teach in the hallway sometimes. There's a weight room that you could probably fit 10 kids in, even when I was there. And so it definitely needs a gym, which I think is great. If you come here to Sheehan, you're counting Sheehan's facility, and it is a good facility. But if you were to come into our fitness room, I can only fit 15 machines. And I have approximately 21, 25, 25, 26, and 28 kids in my classes. So that to me would mean I would need a bigger facility for that. But I guess one of the other issues that I have is that teachers aren't being asked, does this facility work? What could be better? And before we start putting plans together and putting numbers on things. So I do have a problem with the new school being deeply undersized for what it would need, because we are already undersized. So that's my concern. When it comes to athletics, I would love to have one school. When it comes to academics, especially for my daughter, I think smaller facilities, classrooms, knowing more teachers is better for them. All my colleagues that have students that go to bigger schools, 15, 17, 2,000, and so forth, they all say that they don't know a lot of their teachers. They don't have the connection that we have here at Sheehan or at Lyman Hall. So for that reason, academically, I'm in favor of 2 high schools. I do like the fact that you are adding on to Lyman Hall's gym if it were to stay that way. But if not, I would say that if we are doing a new school, there should be teacher input with the people who work in those facilities so that we know that we're getting what we're gonna need for our classrooms. And other than that, that's it. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public here this evening that did not sign up that wish to speak before we move on? Hi, please come up and identify yourself with your name and address for the record. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Gloria Harbati. I live at 3 Pequot Road, Wallingford. I'm a grandmother. Both of my children attended Sheehan, and currently my grandchildren, one is at Cook Hill and one is at Moran. They dream of coming to Sheehan, the 2 younger ones. They just love this school. This is Wallingford. If we merge into one school, I agree with the last speaker. The kids are going to get lost. They're not going to know the students unless they grew up with them. It's very hard to make friends in a large school. I went to Newtown High. I graduated with a class of 100. We knew everybody. We knew all our teachers. That's ages ago. I know that can't happen, but we have to remember Wallingford is a large town with lots of open space. This town will grow. It has been growing. I've watched my entire neighborhood fill up with houses. So that's an issue we should consider, that just right now we have a slow period. It's going to grow. People are going to be buying houses eventually on these lands that are called farms. And unless the town buys up all the open space, this is going to happen. This is what's happened in all the towns around us. Look at all the community. Look at Southington, how they're building houses and developments. Look at Cheshire. It's the same thing, and it's going to happen in Wallingford. It's just maybe a little slower. But I keep seeing all these houses being bought and sold, and I look at my own neighborhood. I don't want to see our schools become the size of Southington. In my opinion, it's a McGlock. I don't know how you want to call it. It's just too large. They have thousands of students in there. And the kids will lose the opportunities. You talk about, oh, we're going to have a great baseball team and a great football team because we're going to have all these kids to choose from. But these kids are losing out on learning sportsmanship, learning just playing sports on a smaller scale. It's not really small, but they'll all have an opportunity. Whereas when it's one large school, there's going to be just so many kids that are going to have the opportunity, and the rest of them are just going to be hanging out and saying, I wish I could, I wish I could. If it wasn't for VOAG, I don't think we'd even be considering merging to one school and moving it over to Lyman Hall, because VOAG has the best facility in that area. I've been inside of Lyman Hall, and I must say I was quite disappointed in it, but then I know it's been built a long time ago, and perhaps that was called the state of the art at the time. And just so you know, I've spoken to many people who have stressed they only want to see two high schools in town. They do not want to see one large one. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. Any other members of the public that wish to speak? I'd like to honor members of the public before we turn it over to administration or our consultant. Hi, come on up. We don't know you, so please state your name and address for the record.
Justin Marciano, 49 Clearview Drive. I have 3 children in the school system, and I am the assistant principal here at Sheehan High School. I wasn't going to speak, but I figured I might as well. There's no denying that I think everyone in the community realizes many of our schools, not just the high schools, need to be renovated. I know a lot of us are here talking about the high schools, and that's what I will talk about, but I have 2 kids in the elementary schools. Our elementary schools need some work, some of them. So we do have to consider all the renovations that have to happen there. One of the things that I saw come up is enrollment. And I want to point out, when I was, I'm a Sheehan alumni, and when I was here, my graduating class was about 150 kids. This building felt cramped with 150 kids. You could have never told us that there was only 600, roughly, some odd kids here when I was here. At that point, they were also considering consolidating the high schools. There were enrollment projections, all this stuff was going on. They were talking about the numbers at Sheehan going down, the numbers at Lyman Hall were going down. About 4 years later, Sheehan was around 1,000 kids. So I don't know where they got their numbers from, but they said they were going down, and Sheehan was over 1,000 kids. One of the things that I think isn't considered enough is the community of Wallingford itself. Wallingford is a very transient community. And what I mean by that is people are moving in and moving out all the time. Our numbers go up and our numbers go down. So planning a high school, if we were to plan one building, we'd really have to plan a building for potentially 2,000 plus students, because at any point, we're going to be up there with the number of people that move in and out of our community. And that's a good thing. We see a lot of faces, but I know when I was here, I had a lot of friends that moved in, a lot of friends that moved out. So we'd be having to plan, because we don't want to build a school and then have to build onto that school and then have to build on and then potentially close things down. But it's something that I haven't seen considered, is how much the population seems to fluctuate, particularly in our schools. The other thing I wanted to bring up is small schools run programs and they run their classes. I've heard the comments about we're too small so we can't run classes. Small schools run classes. There are schools that are smaller than us. They seem to run classes. They seem to not have issues. All schools have to cut courses, all of them. So yes, certain courses don't run sometimes, but many courses do get cut across the board in many schools. Athletics, I know, is going to be a big issue. It's going to be brought up many times. There's no way around it. there will be kids who won't play on a sports team. And I think in this day and age, there's so much talk about, social emotional learning and making sure we're taking care of the whole child. And many, many of our kids in this community do that through their athletic program. They do it through youth sports. They do it through some of the middle school teams, and they do it through high school. Looking at my own children, I am looking forward to the fact that my own children will have an opportunity to be on a sports team because they will have more of an opportunity. Those opportunities will, without a doubt, most likely not be the same because you're going to have more kids for the same amount of positions. And then I guess the one thing I would leave you guys with is this one question is, if we go back to why was this building built in the first place? In 1972, what was the reason why Sheehan was built? And it was because there was an explosion of population, particularly, I believe, on this side of town. I know if Chuck Farley was here, he can give us a big history lesson on why Sheehan was built and what was going on. But I think it's important to look at the number of kids that did transition over to this side of town. Potentially, I was looking at a yearbook in 1972, and I believe the English department had about 12 teachers in it. There were tons of kids here, and there were tons of kids at Lyman Hall. The town has done nothing but grow since that point. And so, to the previous speaker's point, the population will grow, the enrollment will go up, and the enrollment will go down. We will see those fluctuations. Either way the community decides to go, I do believe we need to be very cognizant of the enrollment changes that can happen and build a facility that can accommodate everyone for years to come. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments this evening? Mrs. Belizzi, I will turn it over to you to see if there's anything that you want to address, and then maybe I could tee up a couple questions for Mr. Stein, or as you go through the areas, if you want to do that, we can do the same thing. I understand that there may be some repetition in questions to you, Mr. Stein, tonight, from our virtual meeting to the in-person meeting, but you'll just have to bear with us because obviously we have different audiences. We see some themes.
Agreed. So good evening, everyone. In terms of, I'm going to start with the enrollment, and I can work backwards. I'll comment about that. I know Peter Prada and Mr. Stein, feel free to chime in, did an extensive look at our enrollment and has made some significant projections for us, has taken a look at where we were and where he thinks we're going to go. We did add that to our website, so that is part of something that everyone can read through and see. It's a pretty lengthy document. Just looking through some of what he did, I'm just going to share a little quick thing. To Mr. Mastriano's point, it did peak here in town at 9,042 students in 1970, but then it did have a downward trend after that. It looks like what he indicates here from then until 1985, it went down by like 5,800 students. And then it continued to decline. And so I think that's where a lot of what he's put into this is looking at home sales, the expansion of the town, and taking a lot of those things into consideration in terms of birth rates and so on and so forth. So his projections are showing a decline over time for the next 10 years. There are some bumps a little bit in between there, but based on what he's given us so far, that's where we're, what we're looking at in terms of that. In terms of, there were mention of some courses and things. When a course is added or deleted from the course catalog, it does come to the Board of Education for approval to be added or removed. To a point that was made earlier in terms of courses that do not run, we do have a significant number at each high school, but again, as I mentioned earlier, it is all based on student interest, and then we take a look at the number of students that we have and the interest in the courses and go from there. So we do have some data on courses that do run and do not run at our high schools for the past years, and we can be happy to share all of that. In terms of looking back for numerous years, we'll have to collect all of that data, and then we definitely can share that out moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Ross has a question.
Yeah, can somebody tell me the number of buses that are required when school gets out at Sheehan High School? Just numbers of buses.
I'm seeing we might have to get back to you on that. Mr. Barone's shaking his head. He's not comfortable making
Okay.
telling you how many runs run from Sheehan at dismissal.
All right, why I'm asking is, if we build one high school and it goes to Sheehan, we will have to transport 100% of the student body because they're all outside of the 1 hour distance, so we would be transporting 736. And I'm just concerned, do we have enough buses? Will we have enough buses to do that? And when we get over to Lyman Hall, where it's going to be, will there enough space to stack the buses when they're picking students up in the afternoon to come back? Because they don't carry all 941 because of the location. And we don't carry all 736 currently. But if we move the school to Lyman Hall, we're then obligated to carry all 736 students. And my concern is where? Where are we going to stage the buses to pick them up? I understand dropping them off, it's fairly easy, drop and go. But at the end of the day, the buses wait, the entire student body gets out, and I'm just concerned, where are we going to line up that many buses? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Okay, I'm going to go through the board first for comments and questions. Then I guess Mr. Stein will put you back on the hook. Both Ms. Reed and Mr. Votto have their hands up. You guys can pick. Saw you both at the same time.
The old man go first. Okay, first of all, Ray, I'm not too sure I was following you. I believe, I don't know if this answers your question, or right now, most of our students drive to high school or are driven by other people. Most of our buses, if you took a look at them in the morning or the afternoon, they're practically empty. So I'm not sure if your numbers, if I'm hearing right. Do you want to explain?
I think what Mr. Ross was suggesting is just in round numbers. If we have 700 students here, we have to accommodate 700 students on the buses. Students can't opt out of a seat on the bus, whether they
Right.
drive or get driven. So right now, we may have 700 students, but only 500 I'm just using round numbers, don't anybody hold me to these.
Oh.
Only 500 may be eligible for a bus because of who walks. So if we were at one location, be it Sheehan or Lyman Hall, there would be no walkers for the other side of town. So the busing, it would just be more buses, I think was his point.
Okay. The other thing I just wanted, I have a few things, but I'll let other people go first. Well, after me, and then I'll go back. I want you to know that we have looked at places in town. There is nothing in the center of town for a new high school to build something. Dr. Menzo and me and a couple of other board members, we looked around, we've asked questions, we investigated, and there really isn't anything that would accommodate a school with a parking lot suitable for students and faculty, as well as fields. So we have done due diligence when it comes to that. I am going to repeat what I said on the virtual meeting, to keep in mind that this study was mandated by the state. We did a facility study first, the first one. They wanted more information, especially in regards to enrollment. So then we were given the task of doing the facility study from pre-K all the way up through high school. And in that study, obviously, we found many things wrong with, we needed renovations in all of our schools. We can't possibly do that financially, it's impossible. But also, the initial objective was to either work on the high schools and the middle schools, not the elementary. But because of that state mandate, the elementary schools got involved or became part of that plan or be part of that study. We are cognizant of the fact that these elementary schools need work, but at this time, they have to be put on the back burner because we have either one or two high schools that have to be renovated to new or one brand new high school. And then the middle schools, which are in dire need of help. I had suggested at the time to the board that we perhaps can address some of the outstanding issues at the elementary school in-house. Perhaps have Mr. Deptula go over the study, prioritize those things that probably need to be done in the elementary schools, like knock down those portables, and perhaps include those things in our budget over a period of years, because we certainly couldn't do it at one time. So I just wanted to make that clear. There was no intention of us renovating the elementary schools at this time. That was going to come later on, certainly after my time. But anyhow, there were a couple of other things, but I'll let other people talk first.
Ms. Reed?
Hello. I know we're all here, what a hard decision to make, and obviously with the amount of time it's taken to do it in the studies, and we're all concerned about what's best for our kids, parents, educators, Board of Ed members. With that in mind, I tried to do some homework, no pun intended, with much of the data that was given to us by the district. So I do have some things I'd like to point out and maybe, have some information on, or I don't know, but I want to point them out. So the first thing, I know in the earlier meeting, Danielle had mentioned making sure that we have plenty of staff members for connections if we have one building. And I know she can't give an exact number on that because you can't at this point in the process, but I want to point out data. At Lyman Hall, we have 2 social workers, 2 psychologists, 5 school counselors. At Sheehan, we have 1 social worker, 2 psychologists, 4 counselors. If we combine schools, which I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but if we do, looking at the enrollment of the 10 years in the study that was done, at very least we'll have 1,487, so let's call that 1,500 kids. At very most, we have 1,681. So I know there can be no guarantee of us combining our social workers, psychologists, and counselors, but that would give us 3 social workers, 4 psychologists, and 9 school counselors. I don't know of a high school of 1,500 to 1,680 that's been given the budget to hold that many of mental health workers. I think my first and foremost concern is the mental health of our kids today, and we all know that. And even the presentation that was made by the mayor by central office stated that actually, I have it somewhere, the students demonstrated the significant increases in need for psychiatric support in 2021, 2022. So we all know we need mental health support. So I know there can be no guarantee, but one question I have is, how are we going to support that many kids in one building? Are we going to keep the number of mental health workers that we have? And if not, how are we going to proportion it with the number of kids we have? So that's my first concern. My second, that I think we could maybe get more information on. I did the curriculum, the classes, and I know Mr. Corso had kind of talked about that. With the data given to us by the district, I have that at Lyman Hall, there were 31 courses that didn't run. However, 11 had 0 requests. 18 had under 10 requests. At Sheehan, 16 courses didn't run. Of those 16 courses, 13 had less than 10 requests. And I looked at the courses, and very few matched as to courses at both schools, because then you would say, well, if we're combining schools, we'll have more kids. So I don't know if the numbers, and also Mr. Corso had mentioned specific courses, and I just looked those up quickly, like accounting 2, there was only 1 student at Sheehan listed as having a request there, if I read that right, and 0 at Lyman Hall. So even if you combine schools, you wouldn't still run that course. So I think maybe it's important to have an update, as someone had requested in the audience, of the requests and why it didn't run, because really combining schools may not change that in terms of courses that aren't offered. And then, one other thing that I do want to point out, the data of the sports, because I think this is important to look at, the data given to us by the district. They listed that we have 23 sports in their data, the total number of athletes participating in both schools, and then the total number that would be able to participate if there's only one school. There are 180 less students who would be able to participate if there was one school, and 60% of the 23 teams would offer less sports for athletes if there was one school. So I do think it's important to look at these numbers and to look at all the data already provided, and if it's not 100% what it should be, then make sure that it's like 100% of what it should be accurate for us to look at to make these decisions. And again, I'm not saying one school or 2, but I'm trying to use what we've been given to look at, and I think that we want to make sure it's 100% of what we need to make this decision.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Mrs. Regan, then Mr. Doring.
Yeah, I was wondering, only because, just for the benefit, we reviewed this and the virtual meeting, but I would appreciate if Mr. Stein, for the benefit, and after everyone is talking, the benefit and very clearly defining what renovate to new means, as we understand that we are not allowed to go out of the footprint. So we do not, if we renovate to new, we do not, our ability is limited in terms of the footprints of the school versus a new school, which gives us the ability to expand as needed. So I do think that's a really important clarification to make, especially since Mr. Corso has said that we are lacking in some of the spaces. And I don't know that if we renovate to new, that may not improve upon that. So I just want to make sure that we are very clear what the difference between those two are, so that everyone understands the difference between those.
Thank you, Mrs. Regan. Mr. Doring. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Stein, why don't you respond to that first, and then we'll go to more board members. You did a great job at the virtual meeting, so.
Yeah, thank you. I should have taken notes so I could be consistent, but I'll do my best to do so. Obviously, building a new building, there's less barriers or obstacles in front of you because you're necessarily starting with a blank or a white canvas to work from. There's always limitations with any site that you're working from, and you have those parameters to work with. But when you are renovating a building, we are limited by those exterior walls, and from that perspective, you wouldn't want to alter them. There's a lot of value in those exterior bearing walls, the interior corridors, the locations of restrooms, the mechanical rooms, those forth. You want to work with those spaces and adapt those accordingly. So there are compromises or limitations that come into play when you are renovating as you're working around what you currently have in place. With that being said, a creative architect can work around those, and those spaces can be enhanced with proper lighting and better ventilation and newer finishes and millwork and furniture to be able to adapt to those spaces. So the best solution is not always a new school, but there are limitations when you're renovating, and I used the term in the previous meeting. The best term to use is it's renovate like new, because you are getting as close to possible as you can to create a new school, and by doing so, your design team and your educators are endorsing and validating that renovated school will last 20 years. So you're making that validation that everything that you're putting into that building is new, and any of the systems that were existing also have the longevity of moving to new, but there are compromises that go along with that when you're sort of working with what you have. But each one of those just need to be compared out. And as you are debating here and asking the questions is, how do we make that decision? And those need to sort of be played out when you're making those comparisons.
Mr. Doring.
Thank you. My question is in regards to the enrollment projections. So I know that we saw the projections of how many students we expect to be enrolled in the district in the future. Certainly, it's not feasible to come up with an exact number, but is there a certain confidence interval that we could be expecting the numbers to be plus or minus a certain percentage of the projections?
Honestly, Mr. Deering, I'd have to go back and double check Mr. Prada's piece to take a look at that and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Votto.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things, a couple more things. I think this is a very difficult decision to make in everybody's part. I think some people I think a lot of it is emotional. You have ties to a particular school. Someone got up and said she wants her grandchildren to go through here like she did. I understand that. It's difficult. I went to North Haven High. When they knocked down North Haven High, I cried. I mean, we had a great reunion there. It was a wonderful thing that they did to try to make us feel good about it, but it didn't work. I mean, you have ties to those schools. They're emotional. I, as a senior citizen, could have a concern that is irrelevant too. Worried about, is a new school going to raise taxes or renovating to new? I'm not saying I am concerned about that, but it could be. It could be a concern that I have. That's putting my concern in the wrong place. I think number one is educational needs of our students. And I think as long as we maintain that, whether you have 2 schools or 1, that is the answer to this. And we have said repeatedly that classes will not run high as far as the numbers are concerned. We're going to keep them the way they are right now. So if you have 10 English classes in grade 9 between the 2 schools, there are going to be 10 over there, or at 1 school, if it becomes 1 school. Education is number 1, and as a Board of Education, that's our job. And as central office, that's their job, to make sure education is the number 1 concern of our students, and we're not going to let that go for anything else. Now, are there other considerations? Yes, but they're lower on the ladder. Safety. I would think that a renovate to new or even a new high school would have the most safe features for our children, even more than what we can provide now. And we're trying. Let me tell you, know that. Every budget we go over our strategic plan, we find things to improve the safety of our schools. I'm thinking something new just might provide that automatically. So that's another concern that I have when I have to weigh my decision here. I think Wallingford can be very proud of the fact that we have an expansive, substantial support system for our students. I'm talking about guidance, I'm talking about psychiatrists, social workers. I can go back a number of years ago. I have a special needs student who was placed out of the system. We had a person who wanted to bring all the kids back into the system, and Mrs. Levac and I fought very hard. You want the kids to come back, then you have to have the support services that they get at the outside school. And we did that, and that happened. And that stayed. It's still that way today. And I think that's something that we can be very proud of. I get very upset as an educator to think that people might think that if we had 1 school with a lot of children in that school, kids are going to fall through the cracks. That bothers me terribly, because if a school system, if administrators, if teachers, if support services do what they're supposed to do, no student is going to fall through the crack. There might be a couple who, the ones that kind of fade into the back, that can happen in a class of 15 kids. But basically, if you're doing your job as an educator, you are going to make sure that there are children in your class who you think might need some extra help in some area. You're going to refer them to the right person, especially if we keep the proper number of support services. And if we have 1 high school, to have in 1 high school, just like we have now in 2 high schools. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're on top of your concern. We understand what your concerns are, but I think we have to put our emotions aside and think about the best educational needs for our kids, the best support services, and I think you have to put your trust in the people up here that you've elected to do that. And I think that's what our best interest is, always in the interest of students first. And we will continue to do that. It's a very difficult decision to have to make. And by the way, the last thing I was going to put on here is financial. We still have to answer to the town council and to the citizens of this town when it comes to finances. And me, I usually don't care about that because education is first. That has always been in my life. But you still have to think about that. So that's another thing that's going to make us, that we have to consider as a board, the financial implications. So anyways, I just wanted to give my little speech, and good night, everybody.
Mrs. Roscoe.
Thank you so much. I don't know if I can follow that, Mr. Votto. But one of the things that was mentioned on our virtual meeting, and I think just to try to keep things even, I know Mr. Votto mentioned it, it's been mentioned many times, the impending thought about bigger class sizes. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent Belizzi, but I believe regardless if it's 2 high schools or 1, the max class is going to be 25 students. And so, am I correct on that number? Within the, we're
Right,
always
it's a
going to be within the
guideline.
guidelines.
It's a board guideline that we follow.
We're always going to be within
It's a
those
guideline.
guidelines that we currently follow now. And so, just to reiterate that, take that concern away. I also just have a question. If, when we talk about the potential for 1 school, are we talking about things are going to be 1 for 1, or is it going to be more of a hybrid? And I'll give an example. So For example, for clubs, there's X amount of funding for clubs for Sheehan, there's X amount of funding for clubs at Lyman Hall currently. If we were to come together for a merged school, would it be the same amount of dollars that we're currently having put into the pot, or is it going to be some type of hybrid, and do we think that that's going to follow suit across the board?
So I think what we've typically done all along is we take a look at, they're broken up into tiers contractually, we look at all of those components, we look at student interest first. So that would be something we'd have to assess when we, I mean, it's hard to give a definite answer as to exactly how it's all going to play out. But those are things we would definitely take into consideration, putting that amount of students together, because, you know, when you think about that, you want to provide opportunities for students. And so clubs that we have now, we may have more interest in different clubs that we would want to fund. So we'll definitely take a look at that and provide what students are interested in.
Thank you. And then I just have one additional comment. I think oftentimes when we hear about renovate like new or brand new, sometimes we can sort of get rose-colored glasses thinking if we do merge, for example, to one high school, everything is going to be top-notch. But I think it's just important to recognize whether we do two, renovate like new, or one brand new, there are going to be compromises along the way. I equate it to when my family built our house. I would have loved the best of every single thing to be in that house, but budget doesn't always allow for that. And so I just want to make sure we're all looking at it with, you know, very realistic glasses, that we want to do the best that we can, but we're not going to be able to have the best of everything across the board. Just compromises are going to have to come. So I think when you think about that, it's important to recognize that. And I also just want to say thank you so much to all the people who provided feedback, the people who have given, you know, who have taken the time to talk to board members, talk to central office. Those words do not go unheard, and I do want to acknowledge that we do take into consideration everything that you say. I personally have been beyond stressed today in anticipation for this evening, and I say that because I want you to know that this is important, and we don't sit up here lightly, and we do listen, and so thank you for that feedback. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Stein, I get to ask you some questions. Can you please, for the audience, share the difference between the reimbursement rates for renovate to new versus brand new? So that's question number one. Followed by the state requirement. I guess what I'm trying to say is, can you explain how the state won't let you overbuild? So we can't necessarily build a high school for 2,000 students if we have 1,500 of saying, it may get to that point, and how that would, you used the word at the last meeting, derate us in the state's eyes. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the Office of School and Construction and Review Grants have established, and this was established many years ago, a baseline formula that districts could use to determine what the right size of a school would be. Now, that varies from every district. We have 169 towns in the state of Connecticut, and everyone's slightly different, but there still needs to be a formula that determines the amount of students and the amount of square footage. So there's a square footage per student calculation, and then there are some other factors that are built in there that determine the bottom line, what that size of that school should be, and that's the net square foot of the classroom. So it doesn't take into account the outside walls. It takes account the actual usable space within the school. That calculation says if you have an X amount of students, your building should be this size. So from there, as you determined, if you had 1,600 students at the time that you were going to build a high school, then you would determine what those were. And that's exactly what we used at the time of our 2019 study. We calculated from there a determination of what that school should be in their theoretical formula. And we put a footprint together that was associated with that. Now, when you're working with renovate as new, you are working with the building that you have. In some cases, your building is extremely larger than you may need, and the state says to us, okay, that's fine, you may be able to remove a portion of the building. It could be, for an example, there's portables that you wanted to eliminate. They'll allow you to reduce the square footage, but within limitations. So if your building is too large, and I guess I used the word derate, from there, they will reduce your reimbursement, or they will derate it downward accordingly, depending if the building is too large. Or if you as a district decides to build a larger school and feel that it is best for the community to do that, or you may build an element of the school that's not necessarily associated with the high school. It could be a community-based element that is often added on to schools, then they would not reimburse you for that. So every situation is different as you're filing your application. But what is true is there is a difference between a renovation reimbursement and a new reimbursement, which is within our report. From there, it changes depending on the certain circumstances and situation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other, okay, Mrs. Belizzi, did we get to everything that you had on your list? Is there anything else that you would like to comment on? Okay, before I turn it over to you for next steps, I will say, as a board, we have limited authority. So we can, and we will probably, after our meeting with the state on February 6th, as a board, regroup and make a suggested recommendation to the town council. From there, it goes to the town council. We, as a board, we cannot call a referendum for this town. How it is handled, even after the town council may decide to either do one or two high schools, go with what we suggest, or do nothing. Whatever they decide, that is even what the public has the ability to do from there is even mandated by our town charter. So we can take it so far, turn it over to the town council, work with them. At that point, I would presume the town council or the mayor would probably put together a facilities committee. But we don't have the power to go out to a referendum to see how every community member feels about this. I appreciate the WEA's comments about us constantly trying to get attendance at these forums. This is a public forum. We had the virtual one because we wanted to accommodate people who might not be able to get out in person. And then we had, obviously, this forum in person at the same evening. We have done everything we can as far as having a Google link, requesting questions, trying to solicit as much feedback as we can from the public. We will continue to keep the public informed as we move forward, and anything that comes to our attention or results, we will talk about, we have to talk about publicly in an open meeting after even the February 6th meeting. We will have an update at our operations meeting. So as far as I can share what next steps are, that's what I will. Mrs. Belizzi, what did I miss? I'm sure I didn't do it as well as you did last time.
No, you did a great job. So I do think after the February 6th meeting, then we'll share publicly. We'll take some of the questions and the comments that were shared both virtually and this evening in person, and then we'll start to put those all together so we make sure we communicate those answers out to everyone as well in a document, and then we'll update everyone. In terms of the February 6th meeting, we do have our facilities steering committee that will be on the meeting with us. Some representatives from central office. We do have a town council member that will be part of our meeting as well with the state, and Mr. Stein and his team will be there as well. So we will take some of the things that we have questions about as well for the state meeting and hopefully get some responses from them and some guidance that we can then turn around and share back with everyone. So they have the same information that we have, so that you have it all, then can make the best informed decision. In terms of the courses and things that were shared, and we are in the process of continuing to analyze all of that information in the student requests, and I know it was requested for us to go back 4 years, so we're going to continue to gather all of that data, and we will share all of that out as well. In terms of student requests and things moving forward, a lot of the information that we're continuing to gather based on the comments and things from the survey we'll definitely share out and group together. So thank you. Mm-hmm.
Great. And I just want to echo comments that were already made by other board members. We do take this very seriously. We are grateful for all of the feedback and all of the comments. I know that this is another evening out for you guys, and we appreciate your time. We appreciate your thoughtful feedback, and we will keep you in the loop as we move forward. And with that, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.